Have you ever wondered what happens to the narcissist in the end? The one who manipulated, lied, and left a trail of broken hearts behind? The one who thought they were untouchable? Today, we pull back the curtain on the narcissist's final act because karma doesn't forget an address. Keep it up. If you've asked yourself, do they ever get what they deserve? I see those hands. And trust me, by the end of this, you'll understand exactly where their path leads. At first glance, the narcissist appears invincible. They move through life with a calculated charm, an air of unshakable confidence that draws people in like moths to a flame. They know exactly what to say, how to act, and which buttons to press to keep others orbiting around them. In the beginning, it's almost impressive how effortlessly they command attention, how skillfully they manipulate situations to their advantage. They create a carefully curated image, a persona so polished that few dare to question it. But here's the truth they don't want you to see. Their power is fragile. It's not built on substance, but on smoke and mirrors. The narcissist thrives on control over people, over narratives, over emotions. They need to be the smartest person in the room, the most admired, the one pulling the strings. But control is an illusion, and like all illusions, it eventually shatters. The cracks start small, almost imperceptible. Maybe it's a slip in their carefully crafted facade, a moment of unchecked rage when someone challenges them, a rare glimpse of insecurity when their superiority is questioned. Those who pay attention begin to notice. The laughter that once followed their jokes feels forced. The loyalty they took for granted starts to waver. Over time, the people who once fed the narcissist's ego begin to drift away. Some leave quietly, exhausted by the constant demands for admiration. Others walk away after a final, unforgivable betrayal, the moment they realize they were never truly valued, only used. The narcissist may try to reel them back in with grand gestures, dramatic apologies, or even guilt trips, but the spell is broken. The more they grasp for control, the more it slips through their fingers. What happens next is both poetic and inevitable. The narcissist, who once surrounded themselves with an entourage, finds themselves standing alone in a room full of mirrors. Mirrors don't lie. They reflect back exactly what's there. No flattery, no false praise, just the unvarnished truth. And for someone who has spent a lifetime running from reality, that truth is unbearable. They may rage against it, blaming others for their loneliness, or they may sink into a hollow depression, realizing too late that the admiration they craved was never about who they truly were, only the mask they wore. The final irony: the very traits that made them seem untouchable, their arrogance, their lack of empathy, their refusal to be vulnerable, are what seal their fate. Healthy relationships are built on mutual respect and genuine connection, things the narcissist can't offer. So, while others move forward, building lives filled with love and meaning, the narcissist remains trapped in their own emptiness. The illusion of control doesn't just crack, it collapses, leaving them with nothing but the echo of their own voice, repeating the same old stories to an audience that's long since stopped listening. And that is where the narcissist's path ultimately leads, not to triumph, not to lasting power, but to a quiet, unremarkable irrelevance. The world moves on. The people they hurt heal and grow stronger. And the narcissists? They're left with the one thing they spent their whole life running from, the truth about who they really are. The narcissist moves through life like a collector, amassing people the way others might gather trophies. Each one serving a purpose, each one a mirror meant to reflect back their own inflated sense of self. In the beginning, it's easy to be swept up in their orbit. They are masters of the honeymoon phase, showering their targets with attention, charm, and just the right amount of vulnerability to feel intoxicatingly real. They listen intently, mirroring hopes and dreams back in a way that feels like being truly seen. But this is all part of the illusion. A carefully crafted performance designed to hook their audience. The moment they sense they've secured admiration, the script flips. The love bombing fades. The masks begin to slip, and what was once intoxicating slowly turns toxic. For those entangled with a narcissist, the realization of what's happening comes in stages, like waking up from a dream only to find yourself trapped in a nightmare. At first, you make excuses for them. The cutting remarks are just stress. The dismissals are mere oversights. The way they twist every conflict into your fault must be a misunderstanding. But over time, the pattern becomes undeniable. You are not a person to them, but a source of supply. Something to fuel their ego, to control, to use until you're drained of whatever it was they needed. And when you're no longer useful, you're discarded, often with the same cold efficiency with which they once pulled you in. What's chilling is how predictable this cycle becomes. Narcissists don't form relationships. They conduct transactions. Friends, partners, even family members are all evaluated based on what they can provide: admiration, resources, status, or simply the thrill of dominance. They may keep a rotating cast of enablers around them, people so conditioned to their manipulations that they tolerate behavior others wouldn't. But even these loyalists have their breaking points. One day the excuses stop, the light bulb moment arrives. This isn't love. This isn't even respect. This is emotional vampirism. And when that truth lands, there's no unseeing it. The narcissist, of course, never anticipates this outcome. They operate under the delusion that their charm, their intimidation, or their pity plays will keep people tethered indefinitely. They underestimate the human spirit, the quiet resilience of those they've underestimated. Because while narcissists excel at breaking others down, they fail to account for the fact that broken things can heal. And when their victims do, when they rebuild their self-worth, when they stop internalizing the blame, the narcissist's power evaporates. The very people they thought they owned become the ones who walk away, often without fanfare, leaving the narcissist bewildered. How dare they? The rage that follows is telling. It's not the loss of the person they mourn, it's the loss of control. This is where the narcissist path grows increasingly lonely. Burn enough bridges and eventually you're standing on an island of your own making. They may scramble to replace the discarded, new partners, new friends, new audiences, but the replacements grow shoddier with time. The quality of their connections deteriorates because healthy people learn to steer clear. What's left are fellow manipulators who see right through them, chronic enablers whose own brokenness keeps them stuck, or the naively hopeful who haven't yet learned the lesson. These are hollow imitations of real relationships built on mutual exploitation or delusion, and they offer none of the nourishment that comes with genuine connection. Meanwhile, those who escape the narcissist's orbit, they thrive. It's one of life's great ironies. The very people the narcissist wrote off as weak, the ones they mocked for their empathy, their vulnerability, their neediness, are the ones who go on to build rich, authentic lives. They learn to trust themselves again. They form bonds where love isn't conditional on constant praise. They discover that what the narcissist labeled as their flaws, their kindness, their depth of feeling, were actually their greatest strengths. And in doing so, they rob the narcissist of the one thing they craved most, the ability to matter in their story. This is the narcissist's true undoing. They spend their lives convinced they're the protagonist in everyone's narrative, only to discover too late that they've been reduced to a footnote in others. The relationships they thought they controlled, those people moved on. The loyalty they demanded, it was never loyalty at all, just fear, obligation, or temporary blindness. And when the dust settles, the narcissist is left with a chilling reality. Their existence, for all its drama and self-aggrandizement, was ultimately forgettable. The love they craved, the relationships they thought they controlled, those people moved on. The loyalty they demanded, it was never loyalty at all, just fear, obligation, or temporary blindness. And when the dust settles, the narcissist is left with a chilling reality. Their existence, for all its drama and self-aggrandizement, was ultimately forgettable. The love they craved but couldn't genuinely give or receive, it flourishes elsewhere, in lives they no longer have access to. The final tragedy isn't that the narcissist ends alone, it's that they don't even understand why. They'll spin tales of betrayal, of being misunderstood, of others being too weak to handle their brilliance. But in quiet moments, when the performative rage subsides, there's a hollowness even they can't ignore. The trophies they collected are tarnished, the mirrors are cracked, and the relationships they thought they owned, they've burned to ash, carried away by the same winds of consequence they swore they'd never face. But here's what they'll never admit. Ash can't be controlled. It drifts where it pleases, and somewhere in the places that ash settles, new things grow, things they'll never get to touch. There comes a moment in every narcissist trajectory when the carefully constructed facade begins to crumble in ways even their calculating minds couldn't anticipate. For years, perhaps decades, they've operated under the golden illusion of their own invincibility, moving through life like a chess master, always 10 moves ahead of everyone else. They've built their empire on the shifting sands of manipulation, believing their intellect charm could outmaneuver any consequence, but the universe has a way of balancing scales, and when the narcissist's downfall arrives, it carries with it a particular kind of poetic justice, the kind that strikes precisely where they're most vulnerable. The first cracks in their armor often appear in what they value most, their public image. Narcissists construct elaborate masks tailored to each relationship and social circle, but maintaining multiple false selves requires exhausting psychological labor. Eventually, fatigue sets in. They slip up, perhaps a moment of unguarded cruelty witnessed by the wrong person, or contradictory stories told to different people that eventually collide. In the age of digital permanence, their misdeeds have a way of resurfacing at the most inopportune moments. That offhand, cruel comment they made years ago, someone kept the receipts. The promise they made and broke without a second thought, it circles back when they least expect it. Their professional lives often become ground zero for their unraveling. Narcissists frequently rise quickly in careers through sheer force of personality and self-promotion. But sustainable success requires genuine competence, emotional intelligence, and the ability to collaborate, qualities they conspicuously lack. The higher they climb, the more their shortcomings become apparent. Colleagues who initially found their confidence refreshing gradually noticed the pattern. Ideas stolen and repackaged as their own. Credit taken for team efforts. Blame strategically diverted when things go wrong. The workplace, with its intricate web of relationships and institutional memory, becomes an unforgiving arena where their tactics eventually backfire. That promotion they believed was theirs by right, it goes to someone actually qualified. The sycophants they cultivated, they scatter when real power shifts. In their personal lives, the reckoning arrives more quietly, but no less devastatingly. The narcissist's inability to form genuine emotional connections leaves them isolated in ways they never anticipated. Birthdays pass with perfunctory social media greetings, but no real celebration. Holidays become increasingly lonely affairs as family members create boundaries or simply drift away. Their phone, once buzzing constantly with attention, grows strangely quiet. They may tell themselves this is by choice, that they're pruning their circle, elevating their standards. But in unguarded moments, the silence terrifies them. The people they took for granted have moved on, built real connections, formed relationships based on mutual care rather than transactional need. Financial consequences often follow the social ones. Narcissists tend to live beyond their means, using material possessions as extensions of their fragile egos. The luxury car leased to impress others, the designer wardrobe maintained for appearances, the extravagant gestures meant to elicit admiration. These financial choices catch up with them when the sources of their funding, whether a high-paying job, a generous partner, or family money, dry up. Their credit score becomes as damaged as their reputation, but unlike social consequences, banks don't respond to charm offensives or pity plays. The lifestyle they felt entitled to becomes increasingly difficult to maintain, and the humiliation of this public come-down is excruciating for someone whose entire identity is tied to perceived success. Health often becomes another battleground where their carefully crafted control falters. Years of stress from maintaining false personas, the physiological toll of constant anger and resentment, and neglect of genuine self-care, as opposed to vanity-driven health kicks, manifest in ways they can't talk their way out of. That hairline that won't stop receding despite all treatments, the blood pressure medication they now depend on, the sleep that eludes them despite exhaustion. These are adversaries that don't respond to manipulation. Medical professionals see through their bravado and half-truths, prescribing reality in the form of difficult lifestyle changes they're ill-equipped to make. The body keeps score in ways the narcissist never accounted for in their grand plans. Perhaps most devastating is the cognitive dissonance that sets in as their world contracts. Narcissists construct elaborate belief systems to justify their behavior and worldview, but reality has a stubborn way of asserting itself. The stories they've told themselves about being universally admired, exceptionally talented, or uniquely victimized become harder to sustain as contradictory evidence mounts. Or they might cycle through increasingly desperate attempts to regain their former glory, sudden religious conversions, dramatic career pivots, or ill-advised legal battles, each effort more strained than the last. The common thread is their utter inability to look inward and recognize their own role in their downfall. The final irony lies in how ordinary their ending often is. After a lifetime of believing themselves destined for extraordinary recognition, they frequently fade into precisely the kind of obscurity they feared most. No grand adversaries defeat them, no epic betrayals undo them. Just the cumulative weight of 1,000 small consequences for actions they never imagined would catch up with them. The world, it turns out, has a limited appetite for their drama. People grow tired. Attention moves on. In their later years, many narcissists become caricatures of their former selves, still holding forth about past glories to anyone who will listen and increasingly to those who won't, still casting about for someone to blame for their disappointments. The performative rage that once intimidated people now elicits eye rolls or pity. The charm that opened doors now seems sad and out of touch. They become cautionary tales whispered about at family gatherings, former colleagues shaking their heads at what might have been. The ultimate tragedy isn't that they fall. All humans experience failure and loss, but that they lack the capacity to learn from it. Where others might find humility, wisdom, or redemption in life's harder lessons, The narcissist remains trapped in their defensive distortions until the end. Even when surrounded by the tangible evidence of their choices, the estranged children, the depleted bank accounts, the lonely holidays, they cannot make the connection between cause and effect. Their final prison is of their own making, built brick by brick from every lie they told others and, most crucially, themselves. And so the great irony completes itself. The person who spent a lifetime believing they were controlling the narrative becomes a footnote in other people's stories. The name they worked so hard to make unforgettable becomes associated with eye rolls and changed subjects. The legacy they imagined would endure becomes, like their relationships, another thing that burned to ash while they weren't looking. The downfall they never saw coming wasn't hidden in some grand betrayal or cosmic punishment. It was in the mirror all along, waiting for them to finally look. There exists a special kind of poetic justice in how the universe handles narcissists, not with the dramatic confrontation they so often crave, but with something far more devastating: indifference. After years of carefully cultivating their image, manipulating perceptions, and demanding center stage, they ultimately face the one fate they never prepared for: becoming utterly forgettable. This is the cruelest possible ending for someone whose entire existence was built upon the need to be seen, remembered, and revered. In their prime, narcissists operate under the delusion that they are irreplaceable. They believe the world revolves around their presence, that relationships and organizations would crumble without them, that their absence would leave an void. This belief fuels their worst behaviors: the tantrums when they're not sufficiently admired, the sabotage of others' successes, the relentless self-promotion. What they fail to understand is that the temporary hold they have on people's attention isn't about their inherent worth, but about the psychological hooks they've implanted. When those hooks are removed, when people heal, wake up, and move on, the narcissist's perceived importance evaporates like morning fog. The process of becoming irrelevant happens gradually, then suddenly. At first, it's small things: fewer likes on their social media posts, longer response times to their messages, declining invitations to gatherings where they once would have been the star. They may initially dismiss these changes as others' shortcomings rather than the natural consequence of their own behavior. But as time passes, the evidence becomes undeniable. Former friends stop asking about them. Colleagues no longer seek their input. Family events proceed smoothly without their presence. The world continues turning, completely unaffected by their absence. What makes this transition so particularly brutal is how it contradicts their fundamental worldview. Narcissists see themselves as the protagonists in everyone's story, when in reality they were never more than temporary supporting characters in other people's lives. When victims of narcissistic abuse heal and thrive, it's often without ever mentioning their abuser, not out of avoidance, but because the narcissist simply doesn't occupy mental space anymore. The very people they thought they had marked permanently move on to build authentic connections and meaningful experiences that have nothing to do with the narcissist. This realization, when it comes, is existentially devastating to someone whose identity depends on being remembered. In professional settings, their path to irrelevance follows a similar trajectory. The indispensable employee who hoarded information and took credit for team efforts finds themselves sidelined as organizations develop systems that don't rely on any single person. The charismatic leader who ruled through fear and favoritism watches as their former subordinates flourish under new management. The industry maverick who burned bridges for short-term gains becomes a dated reference rather than a continuing influence. Time proves that real legacy isn't built on self-promotion, but on genuine contributions that outlast the contributor. Social media provides particularly stark evidence of this decline. The narcissist who once commanded attention with carefully curated posts finds their content receiving less engagement as algorithms favor authentic connection over performative perfection. Their attempts to manufacture drama or controversy now fall flat as audiences mature and platforms change. The follower counts they obsessed over stagnate or decline, while the people they look down upon build meaningful digital communities based on substance rather than showmanship. Even in the virtual world designed for self-promotion, authenticity ultimately wins. Family systems reveal perhaps the most poignant examples of this irrelevance. The patriarch or matriarch who demanded absolute loyalty finds younger generations establishing boundaries without guilt. The relative who turned every gathering into their personal stage watches as family traditions evolve in their absence. The parent who viewed children as extensions of themselves faces the ultimate rejection, being politely tolerated rather than genuinely loved. Holidays once filled with walking on eggshells become joyful again, precisely because the narcissist's presence is minimized or eliminated. What's fascinating is how narcissists respond to this creeping irrelevance. Some become increasingly desperate, escalating their attention-seeking behaviors to cartoonish levels. Others withdraw into bitter isolation, telling themselves they're above the people and systems that no longer validate them. A subset may attempt to rebrand themselves entirely, adopting new personas that feel just as hollow as the last. But the common thread is their inability to do the one thing that could actually restore meaningful connections, engage in genuine self-reflection and change. The final stage of this journey varies. Some narcissists become the lonely figures at the edge of social circles, tolerated but not included, their presence met with polite indifference rather than admiration or fear. Others essentially become self-parodies, still performing their greatest hits to audiences that stopped listening long ago. The most tragic cases descend into conspiracy theories or victim narratives, constructing elaborate explanations for why the world failed to appreciate them properly. What all these endings share is the absence of what narcissists crave most: significance. Not the performative, fear-based compliance they once commanded, but real, enduring importance in the lives of others, the kind that comes from having loved authentically, contributed meaningfully, and touched people in ways that transcend transactions. This is what makes their fate so ironically perfect. In chasing admiration at any cost, they ensured they would never receive the only kind that mattered. The ultimate measure of a narcissist's failure isn't in the enemies they've made or the bridges they've burned, but in how easily both the wounds and the memories of them fade. The people they hurt recover and find happiness. The institutions they sought to control adapt and grow beyond them. The spaces they once dominated fill with new energy and ideas. Life, in its relentless forward motion, proves itself perfectly capable of continuing without them. And so the great cosmic joke completes itself. The person who demanded to be unforgettable becomes, in the end, the one thing they feared most: utterly, completely, and deservedly irrelevant. Not because the world is cruel, but because it is just. Real legacy isn't claimed. It's earned through actions that speak for themselves long after the actor has left the stage. The narcissists, for all their posturing, never understood this fundamental truth, and that is why history, in both its grand and personal forms, forgets them. Their name may occasionally surface in conversation, but not as someone missed or revered, but as a reference point for growth. Remember how things were before we moved on? The stories told about them aren't the epic tales they envisioned, but cautionary anecdotes, sometimes even punchlines. The mark they leave isn't indelible, but faint and fading, like a pencil sketch that time is gently erasing. In this quiet, unceremonious exit lies the universe's perfect justice. The narcissist spent a lifetime chasing the wrong kind of attention, and in doing so, guaranteed they would never receive the only kind that endures. The people who truly matter, who are loved, remembered, and celebrated, are those who gave more than they took, who connected rather than controlled, who built rather than burned. The narcissist, for all their noise and fury, ultimately signifies nothing. And that perhaps is the most fitting end of all. So if you've ever worried that the narcissist won, let me tell you, their ending is already written. Yours, still being crafted. Walk away knowing this: the best revenge is a life well lived. And that's a story they'll never control. Now I want you to take that power back. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment below. Have you seen a narcissist's downfall? Let's turn their ending into your beginning. Thank you.